This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls.
Well, good morning, America. Welcome to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. It is Tuesday, August 7th, and we are going to have a continuation of the programs we've had over the last month on exactly what the deep state is. And we have the pleasure today of having someone on our radio show who is active in national security in Washington, D.C., and has been working with the Trump administration on the design and project management of the border wall, and he also has been very deeply involved in the national security issues that are evolving as a result of the deep state. And that gentleman's name is Chuck Floyd, and Chuck is going to join us today to talk about just exactly how deep is the deep state and what in the world are we going to be able to do to get rid of the deep state. It's been evolving. It's been coming on for 100+ years, and as a result, it is so deeply entrenched that it's going to take really a Herculean effort to make this go away, and it's going to take some time to do it. With that, Chuck, are you on the call? And welcome to the show.
Yes, I'm on the call, so I appreciate you having me today.
Well, thank you for being on, and we've been hearing. I had William Jasper and John McManus on for 2 weeks talking about the evolution of the deep state, how all this globalism, communism, socialism has been evolving in our country for really over 100 years. But we talked about how it is impacting the Trump presidency and the fact that our country is being forced to do things that are antithetical to what our founding fathers envisioned. And I felt that it was really important to get you on the show because you're actually out there in the D.C. area. You're working with actively with national security issues and with the Trump people, and you see the deep state firsthand. And I really want to have you tell our listeners over the next 2 hours exactly why we need to be so concerned and why we need to get involved and why we need to really make sure that the deep state doesn't win the United States of America over. So with that, Chuck, first, would you kind of tell our listeners really what the deep state is and how it evolved into what it did?
Okay. Well, if you look at the definition of the deep state, as far as what Google and the dictionary and others say, it is a body of people, typically influential members of government agencies or the military, believed to be involved in the secret manipulation or control of government policy. The deep state and its policy of allowing extreme ideological to flourish may be the actual issues of concern. So, right now, the deep state is trying to divide us because, they do not want us to have the American culture, the American identity that we've had in the past. So the deep state agenda is to dumb down our society, remove God from our culture, remove a sense of being an American, remove articles of the U.S. Constitution and our rights, and they do not want to abide by current laws. They want us to put us into groups so they can promote division among us, and they do not want our teachers to teach U.S. history or capitalism, and it's all about being inclusive. It's about liberalism, and absolutely it's about power. Because if you look at the individuals, again, over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's all about power. And so, some of the solutions that we need to talk about are term limits for people in Congress. We need to know about our national debt, and we need to look at how the American culture is being ruined by inclusivism and also immigration policies. No country in the world lets the amount of people into their country as we do. We let 1 million people per year come to the United States. As U.S. citizens, we should, allow maybe 50,000 or something, whatever that number is, but 1 million is too much. And so, again, what the deep state is trying to do is to divide us and make sure that the American culture is destroyed. You look at Europe, every country in the EU, what's happening there. You look around the world and see that deep state is not only in the U.S., it's all around the world.
Absolutely. And Chuck, one of the reasons that I had John McManus and Bill Jasper on for 2 weeks is the fact that the John Birch Society has been warning Americans about the UN and about this push to global governance that we hear about. They mentioned the fact that when the UN Charter was framed, that actually the delegates from the United States, most of them were proven to be communist agents that were working directly for Stalin. So this model of global governance that we're hearing about is actually modeled on a communist system, top-down control, and loss of private property and all the things that we're seeing now happening in the United States on a daily, hourly basis. And so there's a connection there, and that's why it's so important that someone like you that's actually out there in the swamp and trying to help the president drain the swamp, who really understands this.
Did we lose Dan?
We did. I can't hear him.
Okay, not sure what the problem is there. We'll go to a quick break here and see if we can find where Dan went.
Okay.
Hang on, folks.
The That squeaky clean sensation like none other with Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash. Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash is a unique natural formula not found in any other oral care products. With a gentle combination of zinc, folic acid, myrrh, and clove oil, Vitamer effectively whitens teeth, removes plaque, and freshens breath, and it does it naturally without any harmful chemicals. Visit us online at Vitamer.com. That's VITAMYR.com. Or call us today to place your order at 1-888-558-8482. That's 1-888-558-8482. Keep your teeth and gums healthy with Vitamer toothpaste and mouthwash. Vitamer, nature's answer to healthy teeth and gums. And remember, it's all completely natural. Available at participating health food stores nationwide.
Olive's Auto Parts, 1135 Michigan Avenue in Orofino. Olive's Guns and Ammunitions, gunsmithing, accessories, scopes by Night Force, new and used. Olive's Chainsaws, sales and service. That's Olive's Auto Parts at 800-592-6832. That once again. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, I'm sorry that I dropped off on that call. Between Skype and telephones, doing a radio show, it's an enormous, really obstacle to get a flawless show. But I thank our listeners for hanging in there. Chuck, did you hear my little diatribe about the push for global government? And I wanted to hear your response to that, because the John Birch Society has warned for the last 60 years that there is a push for UN world government, and we need to avoid it at all costs. What do you think about that?
I think it's a lot of legitimacy to that issue. You look at how Trump has engaged the world. When President Obama was there, he just got along because he agreed with this global ruling class mentality. And so Obama would agree with the EU, all the Europeans, on what they wanted to do, and never challenged the Chinese, the Russians, or anybody on anything. And so you look at President Trump coming in, he says, I'm going to make America great again. And so that means we are a nation where we need to be leading the world. We don't need to be following and bowing down to the world like Obama did. And so there's a lot of truth to this, and you look at what Nikki Haley's been doing in the UN, challenging everything there. And so as long as the American taxpayers were burdened with paying the UN fees and NATO and all these other things, everybody got along well. And so now Trump is in, and he's challenging the status quo. And that's exactly what needs to be done, because we don't need to go along with the rest of the world, the Europeans, the Russians, the Chinese, or anybody else. We need to go along our own path and be the leaders of the world, and not the followers like Obama and progressives want us to be.
Well, and also with that, I have to mention the fact that the UN Charter and the UN delegation that created that charter were proven later to be communist agents, and so much of what is in the UN Charter is right out of the Soviet Constitution, not out of our Constitution, and so it doesn't reflect individual rights. It reflects collective rights, and it reflects top-down control, not bottom-up type government. And because of that, there's I guess, a natural conflict between the UN and our U.S. Constitution. And frankly, I think you and most others agree that our U.S. Constitution is really exceptional, and it's created an enormous opportunity and freedom for Americans that if we go under the UN system, if we go on global governance, we will lose a lot of the liberties and the rights that made America really great.
You're absolutely right. And you look at OECD, we pulled out of that because we could not influence, and so we go, hey, we're just going to pull out of that. And you look at the UN structure and how that is formatted. Many of the listeners would be surprised that the head of the UN can never be a U.S. person. It's always a foreign person in charge of the UN. Why is that? Because we need good people from the United States as head of the UN in order to straighten it out and get all the corruption and everything else out of it. And we have all these leaders from all over the world being UN head of the UN, and they're never going to do that because they don't have the background and the professionalism in order to do those sort of things, or even the technology to do it. And if you look at the EU, why was the EU formed? The EU was formed primarily as an economic engine to compete with the United States. However, the EU bureaucracy has totally transformed itself from a basic economic engine to a total bureaucracy and control of all of the EU countries. And so, that's a perfect example right there between the UN and the EU of what we want to combat and what President Trump is doing.
Right, exactly. And I want to remind our listeners, too, that the Security Council, which was the really supposed to be the guarantors of freedom for countries around the world, if you look at the makeup of the Security Council, and they're now talking that virtually any country can be a member of the Security Council, and the United States and other countries that have been the cornerstones of that will no longer have that right to continue in that capacity. But if you look at what the Security Council is, it's United States, Russia, Communist China, France, Great Britain. And all of those countries are socialist countries except the United States. And now, in fact, I think the United States is also a socialist country. So it's either socialist or communist at the very core of its control.
Yeah, I agree that we're heading that way, but Britain is fighting back because they're getting out of the EU. We're fighting back with President Trump in office, and again, the deep state is doing everything they can against him in order to maintain their status quo and their power. Even before President Trump was inaugurated, they were working feverishly to discredit him and put all the road obstacles in his path so his administration would not be successful. And so you go back to Obama and Clinton, you go back to Comey, all these other people that were involved, and you're talking about a conspiracy. This is a true conspiracy of the deep state of people in the FBI, the DOJ, the Democratic Party, Clinton, Obama was heading all of it. And you look at what they were doing in putting the tripwires and everything else in there for President Trump when he first came into office. It's a good thing he had Don McCann as his legal advisor, all kinds of other people who were seasoned individuals with the Washington establishment, or he could have failed, and he didn't. He has not failed, and we see that every day in what he's doing. That he's bringing America back, and he's making us relevant in the world, and he's making the average citizen, the taxpayer, the key point, and not the members of the deep state. You go back and look at the FBI employee who said, we have to have an insurance policy. Now, what do you think he was meaning?
Right, exactly. Exactly. Well, Chuck, I would like to pick your brain about how our intelligence and our law enforcement agencies got so co-opted into the deep state. I know you've made several comments to me about some of the things that have happened in Washington since Trump took over, and it's obvious that these people were in there making every attempt to change our system from the inside out under the Obama administration. Tell us how we became so corrupted in our law enforcement and our intelligence agencies that they began to be part of the problem rather than the solution.
Well, when President Obama was in office, he picked people like Brennan and many others who have the socialist and communist kind of philosophy in the world view like he did. And so you go back to the election of 2016, years before that, they were paving the way for Hillary Clinton. You look at the Democratic Party and how they cheated Bernie Sanders and how they rigged the entire system, how they coordinated with Steele and the law firm in Washington, D.C., that everything flowed through so that people couldn't get the information because it was lawyer privilege. So, it goes back to several years where the Democrat Party, Obama and all his people, were planning on Hillary Clinton being elected because she's privileged and she's part of the deep state, and so they wanted to protect her, and so they started all of this behind the scenes within the government, and it's just amazing that so many government employees would even go along with this at the senior levels. The DOJ was fully corrupted, from Holder to Loretta Lynch, Comey, and all of his folks at DOJ and the FBI. And so these are the law enforcement agencies that make a difference. They can put you in jail. They can go after you. You look at Mueller and what he's doing with Paul Manafort. I mean, they're just going back and trying to do a scorched earth program. So, you even go back and look at Clapper, Panetta. Panetta was both at the CIA and DOD. He lied about Benghazi. There were assets available in Europe to help protect those brave individuals that were in Benghazi, and unfortunately some were killed. But they had assets available, and Panetta lied about it. And so you look at who Obama put in charge of all these agencies and their political bias, their schemes, and how they acted. So this is very, very deep, because right now President Trump has been denied putting thousands of his political appointees in place. He's allowed over 4,000 political appointees in his administration. Right now, he probably has 500 tops, and there are probably another 400 in the process of being voted on by the Senate. Why in the world has Mitch McConnell not voted on President Trump's political nominees in 2 years, almost 2 years? There's got to be a reason. And so, again, you look at these long-term senators who've been there, they are part of the deep state.
Well, and I know that you're absolutely right. That's an important point to make, too, is that it's not just the Democrats who are stumbling blocks and pushing the deep state agenda. It's also progressive Republicans. And the progressive Republicans are literally, in my mind, they're in many ways worse than the Democrats because they tell us they're conservative, but then they vote the most liberal agendas, and they support the progressive socialists that are in the Democratic Party.
You're absolutely right. Mitch McConnell took Senator Schumer out to West Virginia to do an event with him, yet he won't even entertain funding for the Trump wall, border security. He won't get the political nominees through the Senate. And he goes, oh, well, we got time. We're the Senate. We can delay. There's no urgency anywhere in the Congress. You look at Paul Ryan. I'm glad he's leaving. I mean, he's been a very true disappointment to me and many others, where he would not support the president's agenda early on. He helped, and again, both of them helped with the tax cuts, but that's about it. And so, many of us just do not understand what the Senate leader is doing. We know he's gotten a lot of judicial nominees through, but other than that, we haven't seen much out of him, and we haven't really seen good support from him for President Trump's funding issues and getting his political appointees through. The problem with the Senate, you have to get the senior political appointees through. They're the what we call the SESs of the world, where you come in and they're top leaders in each agency. And then once these 500-600 people get in, then there are several thousands of people that they're going to hire that do not have to be Senate confirmed. And so most of these agencies, DOD, Department of State, all these other agencies are not hiring these Schedule C individuals that have been Trump supporters from the very start, helped him on the campaign, who are very professional, technically and professionally qualified. So those guys are not getting in. A lot of us have been waiting, going on almost 2 years now, waiting to get in to help President Trump do his job, yet the Senate will not vote on the senior SES, which you call PAS. They have not voted on them, and so that's delayed thousands of people coming into the government to help President Trump. I see that as a huge issue for the president, because you still have Obama people there, you still have all these political allies of Hillary Clinton at each agency, and they're doing everything they can every day against President Trump. President Trump has to have his 4,000 plus political appointees in all of the agencies in order to help him do what he needs to make America great again.
Right, exactly. Well, I know you've worked very hard on the border wall issue, and now that's come up over the last several weeks. And in spite of the fact that so many of these Republicans ran on creating the border wall and made it part of their campaign, when it gets right down to it, then they don't actually support the program. And the president has threatened to shut down the government if they don't put funding in place to take care of that border wall. I see him having to do things that it's like they're trying to force him into a position where I guess they think it's going to hurt his reputation as president, and it's going to destroy him internationally and in the United States with the voters. But I think it's backfiring in their own faces. I think he's gaining support because of the tough stance he's done on a number of things.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. If you look back 2 weeks ago, Mitch McConnell said, oh, well, funding the wall is not important to me. We'll do it after the next election. That's what they say every election. And so, I've sent several emails and different things into the White House and said, hey, shut down the government. Force Mitch McConnell to put funding in. The president needs, 20, 30 billion tops for border security, which includes the wall, more ICE agents, more CBP agents, and others. Illegal immigration between prisons and hospitals and schools and fraud and everything else costs the American taxpayer over $100 billion a year. You know, the ROI is within a third of a year that you get your money back. And so, you know, why is it that these liberal Republicans and all these progressive Democrats don't want border security? It's because the Democrats want new voters, and Mitch McConnell is aligned with some business people who want cheap labor. You know, nobody's thinking about the American culture, about the American taxpayer, and what has to happen in order to keep America great. We cannot keep up what we've been doing. You look at the Senate and the House over the last, long time, 20, 30 years on the budget. It was increased under President Bush, and it exploded under President Obama. The federal debt is, $21 trillion now. And so, who can afford to pay that? Look at the interest. The interest pretty soon is going to be bigger than what the DOD budget is. So, the Congress has not done their job for a long, long time. They keep doing omnibus spending bills. They're required by law to debate and pass individual spending bills per department. DOD, Department of State, DHS, HHS, all these different agencies need their own budget. They need to be scrutinized. You look at the number of grants and the types of contracts that come out of the federal government. It's amazing. They put, shrimp on treadmills and to measure whatever. State Department last year did a contract where they spent $30 million on IT software and hardware for all of the Mexican courts. Why should we pay for the Mexican court system and give them $30 million? Why do we give, I've seen grants and also contracts where we're doing solar power energies in China, and we're paying for it. Why do we do that? I mean, it's just nuts. The federal government could be cut by 20% easily and never miss a beat. And so, one of the key things that I saw recently was that, once President Trump came in and at the State Department, they were trying to do a reorganization because they needed to reduce the number of staff and what they're doing overseas and all those sort of things. And the Democrats in Congress fought the entire reorganization plan, and they delayed nominations, they delayed funding, they delayed everything because they wanted the status quo, and because most of the individuals at the State Department are very progressive, and they're just diplomats, and they just want to keep talking and going, and where President Trump wants to talk and have results. And so the Democrats in Congress were fighting everything that the reorganization was doing. And finally, recently, Secretary Pompeo just kind of given up on the reorg and said, hey, I'm going to start hiring people, and we're going to go back to the status quo so we can get something done. So this is a perfect example of the deep state in action with funding.
Well, and I have, Chuck, I have firsthand knowledge of some of the funding things that are going on because I work with a program in Montana called the Montana Forest Stewardship Program, and it's supposed to be a program that promotes private forest stewardship, educates landowners to be better stewards of their forest by giving them the information, the scientific information and understanding of the ecology of the forest so that they can be better landowners. It's a great program, and I've supported it for 20 years. But one of the things that comes out of that program, there are a bunch of government agencies that are part of the stewardship steering committee, and they do a program every year called the Legacy Project, where they take privately owned lands out of production, or from a logging company. They will allow logging on it, but they put them under either state or federal funding to take control of through conservation easements of those properties. And what it does is it takes productive land literally off the tax rolls and puts it on the back of the taxpayers, and then over a period of time they increase the restrictions on the use of that property until it's totally under a federal control, under a program that keeps people off the land. The last thing we need in this country is more government debt and more mismanaged government land. And yet every year they scramble to come up with new programs and new projects that they can fund to do this stewardship stuff. And what they do, they call it the Legacy Program, but it is actually to take private land and take it out of private hands and put it in under the control of federal agencies, and therein the environmental NGOs that are controlling these things. This is the kind of thing that's going on in this country, and it doesn't matter how broke we are, we continue to do it anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I mean, President Trump, that's why President Trump needs his political appointees into all these different agencies so they can review what's going on. But again, you look at a lot of the senior people that he has in some of these agencies. The media and the liberals go after them every day. They're going after the DHS secretary. They go after her. They even harass her when she's out for dinner. And so if anybody is effective where they're cutting regulation and they're doing something to fold back Obama regulations, the media and the progressives are after them every day. Now, you look at even Antifa. Antifa, in my opinion, should be categorized as a terrorist group. They're out every day. They're blocking the ICE office up in Portland, Oregon. I mean, Antifa is in Philadelphia. They're out every day protesting, causing violence, and nothing's being done about it. And so, again, you look at Chicago, all these different cities that are run predominantly for years and years and years by Democrats, and their progressive policies on sanctuary cities and illegal immigration and not going after the criminals, and it's just chaos. And so there has to be something done in order to bring America back to what it should be. And President Trump is trying to do that with supporting the police, the military, and others. And we're being bombarded every day by the liberals as far as going against what President Trump is trying to do.
Yes, and Antifa is a perfect example, because if you look at the roots of Antifa, they are a very, very openly communist organization, and their so-called anti-fascism has nothing to do with fascism. I mean, they were created in the 1930s in Nazi Germany to fight fascism there, because they wanted communism. And the difference between a fascist and a communist is the only difference is that fascists are national socialists and communists are international socialists, but they're all socialists. And the fact that Antifa has been creating so much turmoil around the country, they are an openly communist organization, and I think they need to be recognized as such.
Yes, I agree. And then, you look at the policies and what Google, Facebook, Twitter, and all these other social media companies are doing, and they're targeting conservatives every day. You see the hearings in Congress, and they go, "Oh yes, we're going to do our algorithms differently, and we apologize and whatever." And then they go back and do the same old thing. And so, the Democrats were trying to control Rush Limbaugh and the talk radio. But again, you look at what Google, Facebook, and Twitter are doing, and back in 2016, Trump's team beat them at their own game. Where when President Obama ran, I mean, they had all kinds of social media set up, and they knew exactly who was who and whatever. But President Trump had a very, very good campaign, and his people did a great job with social media. And so, Google and Facebook and Twitter, they're all looking at what can we do to squash the conservatives, help the progressives, and they're doing it every day. And so, we have to really take a hard look at what they're doing. And many people have been amazed at, well, is Facebook and others selling my information? Well, if it's free, what do you think they're doing? They have to make money somehow, and they're valued at billions of dollars. And so, how do you think they make their money? They sell your information and to others, and that's how they make their money. So, when people use these free services, they're not so free.
Right, exactly. Well, Chuck, you've been dealing with the swamp on a daily basis, and I want you to tell our listeners some of the things that you've observed, some of the personal experiences. I know you sent me an email when we were doing the show a couple of weeks ago, talking about how several people that you knew in the Justice Department, and, I'll just let you explain it to our listeners, but tell about how this deep state, how you've seen it working very personally.
Well, I'll give you several examples. One, the Anwan brothers, for people in the audience who don't know who they are, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Democrat Party hired these individuals as IT consultants for Debbie Wasserman Schultz and in the House of Representatives, and then she forced probably 20 or 30 other Democrat congressmen and women to use these individuals. And so half the time they didn't even show up. They stole information. They were stealing equipment. One guy, one of the brothers got arrested when he was trying to board a plane to Pakistan out at Dulles. His wife and family had already gone to Pakistan. And so there were several years where you don't know what they were stealing and what they were doing. However, recently, the Justice Department came out and just gave him a slap on the wrist and let him go. And so you look at this and go, what is going on? Because they were hacking and stealing information from members of Congress. They were getting paid millions of dollars. Half of them didn't even show up to work. And all of a sudden, they let them go. So, this is just bizarre, and it's just another example of the deep state protecting their own. And again, even with Sessions in charge of DOJ, and the Trump administration has their own guy at FBI, they're still protecting people from the deep state, and they won't even release information to Congress. You go back and look at Jason Chavez. He was a Congress member from Utah, and he's coming out with a book called "The Deep State: How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is Working to Destroy the Trump Agenda." And so it's his book is not out yet, but it's coming out soon. And so he really will go through and talk about a lot of the things he's seen as a congressman. And again, the liberals love to characterize the Obama years as free of scandal. But, you look at everything from Uranium One to Benghazi to Fast and Furious to the IRS. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the amount of lies and the cover-ups that have occurred under the Clinton and from the Clinton administration of the State Department to Barack Obama as president. So, yeah, it's no wonder people across America are very fearful of the government, and they don't trust the government. And it's just we see this every day, and we go, how in the world can they not give Congress the information they need, since Congress has the oversight, but they redact everything and they don't tell the truth. And I just don't know what's going to happen, whether President Trump's going to have to say, hey, I want everything declassified on Uranium One or Benghazi or Fast and Furious or the IRS or just what. But you look at the IG reports from these different agencies. You look at GAO reports from these different agencies. And again, for another example, at Health and Human Services, they have tremendous amount of fraud. You look at the SNAP program, Department of Agriculture, tremendous amount of fraud there. In one of the, I think it was 3 years ago at the IRS, they sent over 20,000 tax returns to the same address in Atlanta. How do you do that? It's just amazing that the GAO, the IGs, and others can identify what's going on in all these different agencies every year, and nothing gets accomplished. Their computer systems are not geared toward the right algorithms or even cybersecurity. So a lot of people are trying to do good things in the government, but again, we're far from it. And these are just some of the examples. You go back and look at Uranium One, Clinton, Holder, and all these people. Mueller was involved. I mean, just you look at what happened, and why would we give the Russians 20% of our uranium? It's just nuts.
Yeah, you're right. And, it's disappointing to me that there are so many good people in these various government agencies that just sit there and allow this stuff to happen, even though they must know that it's wrong. They allow it to happen just to protect their jobs.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And then, because many of them, they're not in the upper echelon like Comey and the rest of them who are making these critical decisions, and so they just go along to get along. And again, if you go back and look at the number of whistleblowers in these different agencies that have come forward, most of them have been punished. And so that's why they don't even say anything anymore. They just keep their head down and say, okay, I'm getting my salary and my retirement, and let somebody else do it.
Yeah, I've seen that with the Forest Service, with the BLM, because I've worked with them, through the stewardship program, and also when I was county commissioner, and they literally couldn't wait to retire because things had changed so radically in their agencies. And rather than fight back, they just wanted to get their retirement and go away. And the people that replaced them are very, very different, very radical in their environmentalism, and very different in their idea of serving the people.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And you go back and look at when President Trump first got into office. Look at how many of his phone conversations and his internal conversations were leaked. These same tight-lipped people in the government never said anything bad about Obama because they agreed with him. They wanted the world order and those sort of things. But when President Trump came in, his conversations with the president of Australia, for example, was leaked immediately. And they were trying to show that he didn't know what he was doing and discredit him and all those sort of things. And again, the deep state is intentional, and they want to really cause President Trump and his administration serious issues because they don't want things to change. They want the power. They want to be able to have the funds available for things that they want to do. And again, it's not only here, but it's international. And so you have a lot of individuals international that come to the U.S., make money, and try to influence what we have here.
Right. Yes, and it's truthfully, it's international communism. It's so-called global governance, which would eliminate countries like the United States as sovereign nations and make us subject to a collectivist mentality. And if they do that, American sovereignty and American exceptionalism will be a thing of the past.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You look at what does the American people have? What do we have to do under President Trump? He says the American people are his number one priority. Make America great again. Keep the jobs going. Do this, do that. And again, how do you do that? How do the American people weigh in and influence what's going on in the deep state? Again, it's going to be very hard, and it's going to be over many years that we have to do this because the gradual progression of the liberals and the deep state have been going on for years and years, and so it's going to take many years to help destruct the deep state. And so what are American people going to have to do? And so some of the things, we're going to have to demand term limits on these people that get in Congress. Some of them, the longer they stay there, the more corrupt they are. And so, the House of Representatives, maybe a person needs 4 terms tops. In the Senate, 2 terms tops. And they have to get back to the basics of what is a Congress person or a senator supposed to do. They're supposed to pass budgets, they're supposed to vet the budgets, and they're supposed to protect the United States and work on protecting the American citizen. They're the key things that they're supposed to do, and they're not doing any of this. And again, it's all about the Democrats getting voters and the Republican supporters getting cheap labor. So when does that stop? And I think the American people are going to have to demand it and keep going to these Trump rallies and support President Trump and go after the fake news. Right.
And that's an area that we'll cover in the next hour, is the fake news, the media that's been so complicit in this whole phenomenon of the deep state, because it couldn't have happened without a controlled media. And I know one of the things that you've brought out many times, Chuck, is that the media and the way they've manipulated the truth have really created much of the problem that we've got today. So that's a great discussion for the next hour. But I want to get back to the idea that really what is going on here is a fight between what the United States stands for, which is the rights of the individual, versus the worldview, which is now, I think, more and more becoming a collectivist thinking. And I keep telling people you can't have collective rights without individual rights unless you want a totalitarian government. And you see what's going on in Europe, you see what's going on in Africa, Central South America, we are losing the battle for the rights of the individual, but yet I think it's not the average person that wants this collectivist thinking. It's just that they've allowed this stuff to go on because the people in control have been selling this for a long time.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you 100%. And then, the other thing that we have in the United States with our Constitution that many governments do not have is we have the three branches of government, the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. However, from your comments, you look at what the progressives have done, and they have gotten the judicial branch heavily involved in the executive and the legislative branch responsibility. You look at DACA. President Obama did this by executive order, and he even said he didn't have the authority to do it, but he did it anyhow. President Trump came in and said, I'm canceling President Obama's executive order. Here's my executive order. Then we just had a judge saying, hey, President Trump, your executive order is no good. President Obama's executive order is good. So, the progressives and the liberals and the Democrat Party have been using the liberal judges to achieve their agenda over many, many years. And Congress has not stepped up to the plate to do their job. They are just very inactive. They cannot get anything done. And so the judiciary has stepped in and have gone way beyond what they're supposed to. And the American people really need to understand what the progressive judges have done. And again, I give Mitch McConnell credit on this area where he has really pushed to get a lot of conservative judges on the bench. And, he's got the Supreme Court nominee now that they'll hopefully get through before the midterm elections. But this is a real challenge and a real crisis in the United States with the judiciary getting involved in executive order, with executive and legislative business that they should not be involved in.
Right, and interpreting the Constitution in ways that were never intended by the founders, because they wrote numerous letters supporting the way they were thinking, and some of the decisions coming out of the Supreme Court and the various circuit courts are doing anything but upholding what the Constitution intended.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you look at some of these state attorneys general, such as in New York, where they have sued the Trump nonprofit foundation, yet they have let Clinton's foundation go scot-free. And we know that the Russians and all kinds of other entities around the world who are contributing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation in hopes of getting something in return. The Saudis did it. The Russians have done it. The Clintons were very, very active in going around the world asking for donations to their foundation, and countries knew that, hey, we give money to the Clintons, we get something in return. And so, again, you look at the state attorney generals versus the federal bench, and there's an issue with the judiciary overreaching what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. Chuck, let's pick up that thought on the other side of the break, and please join us back on the other side of the break for further discussions.
This is The Micro Effect. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls strings.
Hello?
Even in this wealthy nation, it could come down to starvation in the twinkling of an eye.
Welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Today my guest is Mr. Chuck Floyd. Before we get back into the discussion of the deep state, I want to mention Debbie Boscalupi's Radioactive Wednesday, which is on tomorrow at the same time as our show. And also, I want to tell our listeners, please support this radio network, support our programs, support our drive to increase our reach to the whole of North America through our satellite uplink program that we're working on. We are trying to literally reach everyone in North America with a satellite program that we're promoting right now. So please do that. Support our sponsors and support this radio network by supporting the various guests and the various radio shows that are on. So with that, I'd like to get back into the discussion of the deep state with Chuck Floyd. Chuck, I kind of left this with the discussion that we were going to be talking about the media and how the so-called fake news has taken over so much of our country's communication systems, television, radio, the newspapers. I mean, if you look at who controls all these different communication entities, it really boils down to 5 or 6 big mega companies that control it all, and they are making sure that we only hear the progressive liberal version of what's going on in America.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, if it's something that is adverse to them, like the CBS CEO being charged with sexual harassment, they tailor that down and really don't go after that. And so it's amazing the number of issues like the Trump Great Economy or the Trump meeting with North Korea or the sanctions against Iran and different things that are so good for the United States, they don't even want to cover. And so the only thing they want to cover 24/7 is Russia. And so the deep state is used to being anonymous and without consequence. And again, you go back and you look at when President Obama was in office and he had control of the House and the Senate, they were going after talk radio. They wanted to ban Rush Limbaugh and others that had a conservative voice, even though they controlled the predominantly media on TV and in the newspaper. But with the social media, they really can't do that anymore. And so President Trump is doing a very good job with Twitter, where he gets out there. If they go after him, he goes after them. What we did not like about President Bush when he was in office is that he would get criticized every day, he and Karl Rove and others, but they would never respond to it. And so if they didn't respond, then everybody says, well, it must be true. And so now we have a fighter in the White House. We have somebody who's going after the media and calls them the fake news, and he shows where they are wrong time after time after time. And so the American people, I think, have now finally gotten on the bandwagon where, hey, we understand what the media is doing. We know what the Washington Post is doing. We know what the New York Times is doing. We know what CNN is doing. That's why they've lost all their viewership. Their ratings are just in the tank. And so I think we have to keep after this. But again, we are so proud of the president that he fights back every day. And he has individuals, Dan Scavino in the White House, who does all of his Twitter for him. And so they're doing a great job in communication. And you look at Kellyanne and all the rest of them, Mercedes and others that go out every day and defend the president and what's going on with the media. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is doing such a fantastic job dealing with the media every day at the White House briefings. And again, you look at the actions of CNN and all these other ones at the White House briefings, and you go, why in the world are they asking those kind of questions, and why are they being so disrespectful? And so, again, the more they do that, the more the American public sees what reality is. And so, again, you look at the entrenched leadership, even in the civil service and the media, and they resist exposure, accountability, and responsibility. They don't want to be accountable. Whenever anybody fights back, then they don't really push back that hard. But we need a fighter, and that's what we have in the White House right now. And President Trump fights back, he pushes back on them, and you look at them recede or rescind, and they really never have a good message once he goes and fights back. So there's example after example on that, but I'll let you get in at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the areas that they have had control of for so very long, besides the media, is our education system, and we've been teaching our young people to promote communism and to promote and to fight against individualism and capitalism in our school systems for the longest time, and it's really been intense over the last 20 or 25 years. To tell our listeners, you've been involved with trying to expose the deep state for a long time. Tell our listeners how education is playing into this.
Okay, yeah. Education has been really dumbed down over the last 20, 30, 40 years. I remember when I was a young kid, we had American history, we had world history, and we were taught Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1492. I mean, you go on these campuses anymore and ask college-educated individuals any simple question about American history. What is Jamestown? What is Williamsburg? What is the Bill of Rights? Who's your congressperson? They don't know. I mean, it's just amazing that the system has dumbed down the individuals where we have daughters and who are, one's in college right now, and you look at the education that some of them have, and it's just pathetic. They promote all these liberal agendas and really don't teach them the facts. And so they want to teach them everything but the facts so that they are not educated, and so they make mistakes again. If you know the mistakes of the past and you're educated on the mistakes that happened in the past from Hitler and all the other things in world history, then if you know that, then you're not going to make those same mistakes. But they don't really want to teach world history, what it is to be an American. They don't teach the Constitution. They don't teach capitalism. And so we've got to get back to local control at the school boards. Betsy DeVos is doing a pretty good job at Department of Education right now. But again, you look at the funding mechanisms and what's going on, and again, a lot of the school systems have turned into babysitting events. You look at the number of illegals in our school systems. They don't speak English. They don't want to speak English. You try to educate them, English is second language, and they're there to create. A lot of them are gang members. They're there to create havoc and to commit crimes. And so the more people that you have from around the world into our school system that do not speak English creates heavy responsibility on the school system, and it does not create a good learning atmosphere for American students who do speak English, because they can't excel and they can't get pushed forward because all the money is being spent on English as second language. So there's numerous improvements to our education system from pre-K all the way to high school and all the way to college.
And that system that we've got in place right now, well, first of all, I think education should be a local matter, and a lot of folks were not in favor when Jimmy Carter created the Department of Education. But I think it's time to take away those programs, because under Common Core, that should probably more appropriately be called Communist Core, because what they're teaching is collectivism. And let's face it, our young people are not going to be competitive in the world stage against all these young people from other countries who are getting a good education, who are learning science and mathematics and true world history and the things that right now aren't being taught in our universities.
Yeah. You look at the STEM program, and who in our universities, what students are in engineering, computer science, all the physics, and all these other hardcore sciences. A lot of them aren't American citizens. They're Asians and others from around the world. And so our liberal system has not promoted the correct amount of education to our young kids that then can excel in college. There's too many liberal programs that they can go after and study. And so the whole education system has to be revamped from pre-K all the way up through high school. And that's going to be a challenge, because the progressives have had 40, 50 years of trying to change the education program. You look at even math in grammar school and how they've changed that. When I was, went to school, 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 3 is 5. And then you look into algebra and other calculations and other courses, and the educators have changed how you do math, and it's a roundabout way. And I was looking at some of the things several years ago that our daughter was doing, and I'm going, how in the world do you learn math the way they teach it? It's just unbelievable. So you got to get back to the core and really do a good job in education. And you look at the U.S. history especially, and the progressives they have tried to change that. You look at Robert E. Lee, the Confederacy, and all the other things that are part of our history that are now taught as racially biased and those sort of things. And so, again, you look at a lot of the homework assignments that a lot of these kids are given, and it's defacing the Christian religion, and what's so good about Islam versus what's so bad about Christians. And so it's the teachers and their attitude and what they do and say in front of the kids. And you look at recently Mark Sharp, who was a key legislative assistant for President Trump. He stopped doing his legislative work with Congress and went to the University of Virginia, and several professors at the University of Virginia said, "Oh, he's too conservative. We're going to resign our post." So, I mean, it's just unbelievable the amount of liberals in all these colleges and their attitudes and how they're trying to disparage conservatives and President Trump on a daily basis in the classroom.
Right, and this isn't an accident. I mean, there was a commission that was formed in the 1950s to study the impacts of foundation money on our education system, and the information that came back from that study, and actually doing interviews at the various foundations like the Ford Foundation and the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations, were that they were trying to meld the American system and the Soviet system into a common education for kind of a collectivist New World Order. And that is absolutely amazing. And the fact that it was proven in a congressional committee, and yet nothing ever happened of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of things die in Congress.
Yeah. The truth is one of them that's been dying quite a bit lately. Chuck, you're really involved with this, and you really understand the deep state, but it always amazes me that they can get these people to stand up there and swear an oath to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, with their hand on a Bible, and then turn right around to do something totally the opposite. I think that there's got to be an incredible number of people up there that are either dumb as a stump, or they are so totally corrupt that it means nothing to them to lie like that in front of the public forum.
Well, let's take Nancy Pelosi for an example.
Great example.
Why does she lie so much in front of the American public and go after President Trump, what he's doing? Why did no Democrat vote for the tax plan that has been so successful? It's all about power and money, because they don't want things to change. You look at their power brokers. Again, if you go back and look at when President Obama was there and we had the financial crisis, and all of a sudden Congress gave him, what was it, $950 billion? Where did that money go? It didn't go to construction-ready projects. It went back into the unions. It went back into the schools, and all of his. It was a patronage program, and so it went back to all his people. And guess who gave donations back to the Democrats and to Obama? I mean, you just got to follow the money. You look at the stockholders of GM. They got raped. They destroyed those stockholders. They did not protect the stockholders and gave the funds to the unions. And so, again, you look at today how far left the Democrat Party has gone, where they're talking about openly being socialist, and Trump is talking about jobs in manufacturing, in mining, in energy, all these other areas, And guess what? A lot of the unions are saying, hey, we agree with President Trump now. We don't agree with the Democrats anymore, but they're between a rock and a hard place as far as where is the money going. And with the Supreme Court decision that union members, if you want to contribute, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to anymore. And so that was a huge step toward giving rights to individuals who are forced to join unions. And you look at the school systems, every teacher is forced to join the teachers union, and if they don't get a job and they're punished.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Well, I know that one of the things that's come out of all the, as you mentioned, union activity is the fact that what President Trump is talking about is real jobs with mining and steel workers and people who have traditionally always supported the Democrat Party, and now they're starting to realize that those Democrats that they've supported have been cutting their throats while they've been trying to get their vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me give you an example of this. The coal industry is huge in the United States. We have lots of reserve in coal. We have clean coal from West Virginia all the way up to Montana. The key issue now is coal companies in the United States can export and sell their coal products internationally. Japan, they keep a 30-day supply of coal on island, and so they have to have a continuous shipment of coal in order to support their huge manufacturing and their industries in Japan. The liberal western states along the Pacific coast, from Washington down to California, have all gotten together and have banned coal exports from all of their ports. This is a huge issue. It's a federal issue. It's an interstate commerce issue, and there's going to be serious litigation against these three states coming soon in order to have coal exported from some ports so that they can go into South Korea, into Japan, and other Asian markets. We can sell tremendous amounts of coal, and so a lot of the union members of coal country are for this. And the states have all gotten together out there, and they go, well, we have to have a regulation on clean air and this and that, whatever. So this is a huge issue for the federal government. It's an interstate commerce issue. It's an energy issue. It's a jobs issue. And to me, if the federal government is going to provide funds for all these different ports from Washington to Oregon to California, then these states are going to have to be forced to accept coal exports out of their ports. This is a tremendous amount of jobs, tremendous amount of international income for the United States and for the American worker. And the progressives on the left coast are adamantly opposing any exports on coal and other vital issues, energy issues, oil and other things going out of the West Coast. So this is a true issue for the unions, a true issue for the federal government, and it has to be solved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if these individual states can restrict a legal product, a legitimate product, from being shipped out of their ports, they could literally do that with anything, any legal product. It could be cattle, it could be lumber, it could be anything. And so the fact that they're doing this tells you how little regard they have for free enterprise and constitutional law. I hear the break coming up. Chuck, hang in there, and we will pick this conversation up on the other side of the break.
Okay, thanks.
This is The Micro Effect. The Micro Effect.
www.themicroeffect.com.
And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the red.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots. I want to remind our listeners that we are really dependent on your support for this network. We are really dependent on your support for our advertisers, and we are really dependent on you for the support of our various radio programs. And the Micro Effect is an alternative media source that very, very few places in America do you get the kind of truthful, honest understanding of what's going on in the world today that you will through programs like Connecting the Dots, program like Debbie Pascalupi's Radioactive Wednesday, also Jeff Bennett's Life, Liberty, and all that jazz, and a number of other programs that we do on this radio network. So it's important that you support our advertisers and you support our network with your funding. You don't have to give a huge amount of money, but we would appreciate your support as a steady support, even if it's a small amount, because we are working very hard to try to bring satellite coverage of all of North America with the satellite uplink, and that does cost money to maintain. It costs money to start, and we cannot do it without you. So please do everything in your power to help this network any way you can. Our guest today is Mr. Chuck Floyd, and Chuck is a national security expert who has worked, during the Bush years on security for the embassies worldwide, because that was a huge issue. And he is credited as one of the, if not the, primary architects of the border security plan that President Trump has been studying and trying to put in place in the United States. And Chuck, I want to use that as a springboard for you to talk about the deep state and how they have interfered with the process that you tried to generate with the Trump administration to create border security. Now, we're not talking keeping people from coming into the United States legally. We are talking illegal immigration, and that is a term that is very accurate. It's illegal immigration, not legal immigration. So with that, Chuck, would you talk about your plan with the Trump administration on border security on the southern border and how the deep state has impacted the implementation of that program?
Yeah, absolutely. From our last discussion about coal exports from the West Coast, where the Democrats are lining up against that, I just want to say that yet they will allow no security on the southern border and allow drugs and illegals to come across our border at tremendous numbers. So, why are they doing that? We just don't, get it. So I've been working on the southern border security plan probably for 20 years. We have a little place down near Fort Huachuca that we go to, and we do a lot of testing of drones and all kinds of other equipment down on the border, which is very effective. We have some seismic technology that will identify people or animals walking within a half a mile of the border. And with this kind of technology, we have a drone. As soon as we get a hit on a sensor, then the drone will come out of its cradle, go film where it got a hit. It will look at who's there, film everything, and then come back and settle in its cradle. And so this has been very effective on what we've been doing, trying to get CBP involved in that. And if you look at some of the deep state items, in the last budget that the president signed, they had in there, and I don't know who inserted it, but somebody inserted it, that any construction that the president would do on the southern border could not resemble any of the new border wall technology and prototypes that they did in Southern California. Now, if Republicans control the House and the Senate, how did that kind of language get in there? So that tells me not only are the Democrats putting stuff in, but you have Republicans who are in charge of the system and the process who also agree with that, and they let that stay in there. And as you know, President Trump said he would not sign another big omnibus bill, and so, again, the Senate leader has gone to a mini omnibus bill. And so we'll see what happens there. But again, Mitch McConnell said, well, he's not interested in putting any money into the funding that is supposed to go in front of the president by the end of September, because every year the fiscal year starts 1 October. And so there's a lot going on, and again, many of us encourage the president to shut down the government, to show the American people that he is concerned about what's going on the southern border. The Democrats and many of the deep state Republicans do not want to fund DHS adequately. Again, a lot of the people get things mixed up. You have the socialist who beat Connolly up in New York. She came out as a socialist and said, I want to get rid of ICE. And then all of a sudden, you have many members of the Senate and others that are running for Congress saying, oh, we want to get rid of ICE. They're a bad police agency. Well, most of them don't even know what ICE does, because they were talking about ICE being on the border. The border is the agents on the border from CBP. And so those are the individuals that monitor what goes on the border. They stop people, and they arrest them, then they process them. And again, the law, the way it's written, says that you either have to detain them, ship them back, or you got to release them. And so you look at all of the criticism that the Trump administration has gotten on the young kids that have been shipped to the border by parents in Central South America. They let the coyotes bring them up, and then they just turn them over to the ICE agents or to the CBP agents when they get to the border. And then the Trump administration has to do something with the kids. And so a lot of the family members have come up, the mothers especially, have brought children up. They process that we want asylum, and they go, well, why you want asylum? And, they have no good excuse, and so they should be turned back and, sent back home. But again, the way the laws are written is if you have a child, then you can only keep them a certain amount of time, then you have to release them. And you can release them into the general public, and they disappear. They never come to court. And so 90% of the individuals that have given a court date for immigration never show up. And so President Trump has been trying to crack down. And again, I give the DOJ Sessions, Attorney General Sessions, credit on this. They've been trying to stop this and really hold these individuals and the families together, and then send them back to the country they came from. But again, with the laws that are on the books, they're having a very tough time to do that. And the Democrats and, again, the deep state media is all about the kids. And so whenever they have any stories, it's all about the kids. And if you remember, they showed some of the children in cages. However, those pictures were from the Obama years, and so they never admitted that. And so once it was found out, then they had to admit it, and then they kind of had egg on their face. But again, every day they would go after the kids and what cruel people we are, and racist, and all those sort of things, even though we're trying to enforce the law. So we have written a very comprehensive immigration plan that the Trump administration has and Congress has, and you look at the Goodlatte plan and many others, and Congress will just not vote on it. They think it's going to go away. They just want the status quo. We have to do something about the law. We cannot keep accepting people. Whoever gets across the border stays. We cannot, continue the way we're going. If an army of 100 to 200,000 were on our border and invaded us, we would be defending our border. Over the last, 30, 40, 50 years, we've been invaded, and I use the word invaded because that's what it is. We've been invaded by over 20 million illegal immigrants. And, a lot of them come in on visa overstays, but most of them walk across the border. So something has to happen. We have to have comprehensive immigration reform, not like the Democrats want, which is open borders. We have to have a very good comprehensive immigration reform that targets asylum seekers, does not allow people just to walk across our border. It stops the drugs. And again, I've been down on the border, the Goldwater Range and everywhere else, and you see people coming across every day with drugs. And so the only way you're going to stop them is through a wall, some kind of physical barrier. And what we designed is we designed a layered security system that has drones, it has sensors, it has a wall, it has cameras, and you have to have it very much like the Israeli model that they use against the Palestinians and people that were coming in and killing them. So there's a lot to be done, but again, a lot of our people in Congress do not want to do anything, and we have to vote those people out and get people in. And so this midterm is going to be critical for President Trump, and then we're looking forward to 2020 where we can get more conservative individuals into the Senate and into the House who will do the right thing and finally do something on a total immigration package that protects the American citizen.
Yeah, right on. And Chuck, one of the things that comes out of the border security problem is the enormous amount of human and child trafficking that has been going on as a result of all these people turning a blind eye to what's really going on along the border. And, the so-called liberals who are concerned about the children don't seem to be quite as concerned about the human trafficking and the children and the prostitution and all the things that are spin-off issues because of that enormous amount of illegal traffic along the border.
You're absolutely correct on that. I've been on the border, spent a lot of time on the border. If you look at the human trafficking routes that the coyotes use, they have what they call rape trees, where they get to a certain spot near the border, and then everybody changes clothes because they've been walking and sweating, and they have all kinds of things with them. And in these particular lay-down areas, you'll see tons of trash, and they have rape trees there where they rape all the women, and they throw their underwear up in the tree as a souvenir and accomplishment. And so I would say at least 90% of the women that walk across that border with these coyotes are raped, and once they get into the United States, even here in Montgomery County in Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C., there's all kinds of prostitution with illegals. It's all across the country. And so the Democrats are not concerned about that. but they're concerned about women's rights and everything else in many other venues. Again, no one deserves to be raped at all, whether they're walking across the border or just sitting in their home or whatever they're doing. And so again, the Democrats talk out of both sides of their mouths, and we need to help protect people. And again, we need to stop the destination and the magnet. We need to stop the jobs. We need to have E-Verify. We need to make sure that employers are rated out by ICE, because ICE, that's their job. ICE looks at employers in who they hire. They go after the MS-13 and the other gang members that come into our country. So again, for people that don't know the different functions of DHS, CBP is on the border, ICE is internal, then you have Coast Guard and all the other effects of the Department of Homeland Security. But people really need to understand that and focus on what's going on. And if you look at the Heritage Foundation in their annual reports, they have reports every year on human trafficking worldwide. And again, the United States, instead of being one of the lowest, they've always climbed because of the illegal immigration and the amount of rapes that happen in that particular community.
Yeah, and the amount of crime that's being committed in the United States by some of these illegals because of the gang activity and so forth. So, this is a complex issue, but understand one thing, and this I'm directing to the listeners. I know you understand this, Chuck, but to our listeners, understand one thing, that if globalism is to be fully implemented, we have to eliminate national sovereignty. Now, that has been a plan for the last, more than 60 years, because it started with the UN formation, but it's been going on for a very long time, is that if we eliminate borders and national sovereignty, then that is the necessary step for global government. And under this global government system, if there are no borders, then we also have no structure to our national system. Our system literally would have to succumb to international treaties and international organizations. And that's what this attack against control of our borders is all about. It's about national sovereignty. Right, Chuck?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the EU over the last several years. You look at the displacement of people from Syria and other countries in the Middle East, and the EU has forced their members to take certain numbers of migrants from the Middle East and from Northern Africa. You've had certain Eastern Bloc countries say, hey, we're not taking anybody because we're not losing our sovereignty, we're not losing our national identity. And so the EU said, hey, we don't want that kind of attitude. And you look at what Germany has done, what France, Spain, all the rest of them. I mean, Germany right now is having a huge problem. Even this past winter, when they had Chris Kendallmark and different kinds of organizations and social events, a lot of the German women were raped by a lot of these migrants. And so they kept, again, the national media in Germany didn't want to report it, but they were forced to. And Merkel and her crowd, didn't want to advertise it either, but they were forced to. And so President Trump was absolutely right by challenging her on their immigration policy. And then even behind the scenes, she was making a secret deal with the Russians for oil and energy coming directly into Germany versus not coming into the NATO or the EU countries, only for Germany. And so he called her out on that. And so you look at the hypocrisy of so many of these leaders around the world, and again, the EU each country, every time I go to France or Germany or Spain or any of these other countries in the EU, they're losing their national identity. And I was in Luxembourg, and many years ago, and you wouldn't recognize it now. I mean, their national identity is gone, and so we don't want that to happen in the United States, because we want people to come to the United States and be an American and melt into our society, into the norms of our society, our laws, learn English. But the Democrats don't want that. They want to divide everybody into groups. They don't want people to assimilate. And the least that people assimilate is better for the Democrats, because they think they're going to get their vote because they're going to give them more handouts. And so that's why President Trump has to reduce the size of the federal government. We need to reduce our budgets to all these agencies and get the national debt down, and where the American taxpayer is not burdened with those sort of items.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, Chuck, that you're one of the people, one of the appointments that's kind of been hung up in the process in the Senate and the agencies. And I want to use this opportunity to, first of all, ask your opinion of what can be done to change that. We need red-blooded Americans like yourself that believe in our constitutional republic and believe that we're a republic, not a democracy, and that believe in American exceptionalism. We need people like you in place in our government, in these agencies, in areas of national security. What can be done to improve the number of appointments and get this process moving? What can be done?
Well, several things. One, a lot of pressure has to be put on Mitch McConnell to get the votes through the Senate. The second is contact the White House and say, hey, we want the Obama people out. We want our own people in. Push, what you need to. There are some mechanisms where if the Senate is out on recess, then the president can appoint every person in the Senate up to 1 year. So it's called recess appointment. And so he could do that. Again, the person would have to leave after 1 year. But again, if Mitch McConnell can't get the Senate to vote on the presidential appointees in another year, then he needs to be replaced. So there are some tools that the president can use, but again, the pressure has to be on Mitch McConnell, because he's the one that schedules the votes, and he's the one that allows the procedure and the processes to stagnate. For an example, in the committees, if you're in the DOD committee or the Department of State committee or whatever committee it is that handles that particular agency, they have up to 30 hours of debate on each person. Well, you need to be able to structure that 30 hours into a very condensed 30 hours. And so instead of saying, okay, if you're going to meet 1 day a week, that's only 1 hour, so that will take up 30 weeks or a year and a half. You need to consolidate those number of hours into 24/7, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Most of the Congress, they come in on Monday, do something Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then they leave Friday. And so they only work 3 days a week. And so Mitch McConnell and others, they have to keep the people in the Senate more and to have them do their job. If not, then do a recess appointment for all appointees and tell Mitch McConnell you've got to get it accomplished within 1 year.
Well, that brought up an interesting point, Chuck. If the president were to insist on these appointments and tell Congress and the Senate that they need to make these appointments, and it doesn't really matter if they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If they want to delay these appointments, that's exactly what they're going to have to do. I got a feeling that things would move a whole lot quicker and a whole lot smoother if that were the case.
Yeah. A lot of pressure has got to be put on Mitch McConnell as the leader of the Senate, because that's where it happens. That he controls the schedule. He controls everything they do. He controls the number of votes that have to happen to pass certain legislation. So he has his job is key. The president's got to put pressure on him. The American taxpayers got to put pressure on him, and he's got to come up and do his job.
Absolutely. Well, Chuck, as always, it's been a great pleasure having you on the radio show. And please join us again next week. To our listeners, please join us next week. And Chuck, I look forward to the next time we have you on.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I certainly appreciate it, and hopefully all the listeners learned something today. I certainly learn something every time I'm on your show. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.